I always find it easier to work on a nice clean surface. So at the end of my workbench, I've got a large roll of butcher paper, and I can roll it up on the bench when I'm doing any projects. That way I'm not losing little screws and everything else. So we're going to wire in a DB9 plug, and we determined that it is 6, 7, 8, and 9 from the chart I got from Avid. And the yellow, blue, red, and green goes on 6, 7, 8, and 9. Now, if you look over at this plug that I got, it's got the little screws on top. And then you can see down below here, you got your 6, 7, 8, and 9. And we just loosen that little screw, put the wire in, and I'll show you how we finish it. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing, this is the cable that comes with the Avid CNC for the motors. And what I want to do is put one of these ends on the cable that is coming out of the Rotary Axis here. Okay. Okay, the blue goes to number 7. And the red goes to number 8 here. And the green goes to number 9. Okay. So we got those all in there. So this is what our cable looks like. See if I can get that in focus. That's our male cable from the CNC machine, and that's hooked into the 4th axis I had put in when I had the machine sent to me. And so I've taken a DB9 plug and wired the rotary jig into it, and then that's how I will plug it in and unplug it when I go to use it. Now that I plugged it in, literally I'll show you the 5, I think it was like 3 or 4 to 5 things I changed in Mach 3, and to my amazement, it worked. There it is, rotate. From the start of trying to wire it up and get everything, it took me about a half hour. I thought it was going to be an all-day thing, but I got lucky, and with a few of the settings I'm going to show you, hopefully if you have a Avid CNC or a CNC router parts CNC, you'll be able to put this up and running in a few minutes. Okay, let's take a look at some of our settings we got here. Under ports and pins, we're on port number 1. And on motor outputs, being that I have an A axis, I ended up, normally it would be like this, but I don't need B, but I did it anyhow. But I got the A axis, and 14 and 15 are the pin numbers for the step and direction. And I got these from Avid for the computer that I have. And then I noticed that I was going backwards, so I had to change this X to a green arrow as well. It was printing backwards, so I changed that, and then that all worked. So that's what we got right there for our ports and pins. And then let's go, we would say apply and say OK. And then let's go back up here. We're going to go to our general settings. We want to make sure that these boxes are checked for angular, because you're going to be working on A, but if you had more, like you could have a couple different, axis other than your X, Y, and Z. But just click all three of those. And then over here, make sure the home slave with master access is not checked. And then we're going to be good for there. Say OK. And then each time you do want to go into your config and save these settings as you're doing them. And then one of the most important ones is the motor tuning. And if we go over here to our A axis, this is what I have on mine. I got the steps per at 33.33. I got my velocity at 7,002. The acceleration is 1651. And this works perfectly for me. I'm trying to get the math together to show you how I got to this 33. Because I started off, it was 50 some. And that didn't seem to work because it was going around more than once. So then I ended up changing it to this, and it works perfectly. So we'll go back and show you how we got there as well. And that's some of the settings that you'll need. And then, like I say, just make sure you save all your settings and that you get out and restart, and you should have all those settings there. Okay, so when we have our Rotary Axis set up, I put a line here, and right now you can see I'm zeroed out on my Mach 3. So if I go over to the MDI page, click that link, and I can come down here and I can go G00A360, and that should turn exactly 1 revolution. So there, that turned 1 revolution. And now if I want to go back, I can go to G00A0. That should take us back the other direction. So that's how I know I got my steps per inch correct. I have some of this extruded aluminum that I was using on my legacy ornamental mill, but it kind of outlived itself. I had it about maybe 14 years. So I took it all apart, and I've got about 6 or 7 of these, and I'm using this to make the framework for my Rotary Axis on my desktop Avid CNC machine. So I'm trying to get the maximum length I can. I have a 24 by 36. So I want to be able to use the rotary mill to do at least 36 inches. So that's the goal. If that doesn't work, then I'll shorten it up later. But that's what I'm doing now. And I put a Diablo aluminum blade on here that I got at Home Depot. And it's supposed to cut aluminum quite readily. And I've already cut one. So I know it does work pretty well. So I've already got this set. And we'll cut the next one. As you can see, that is very, very clean cut. So I got my 2 long pieces, and now I will get ready to cut my 2 short pieces. So I'm putting my framework together. And basically, I've got these little slide-ins here, and they fit into the groove here, so I can adjust these to where I want them. And then once I have the 2 ends together, then I will mount that onto this aluminum plate, which I'm going to cut on my miter saw, I think. So we'll find out. Okay, we're cutting the 1/2 inch aluminum. I've got a Diablo blade made for cutting aluminum. This is a 1/2 inch thick. We're going to see how it comes out. Okay, that was far too easy.
So I got a few more holes to drill to mount the back plate, mount that to the plate, and I'm going to have a full 35 inches. And this plate here will slide along the rail, and we should have a very nice setup for our rotary. Okay, I've got the headstock bolted down, and I do have some movement this way. And then over here I've got the tailstock. I'm going to cut those off. I only had some long 1/4-20s, so I used those. So I will trim those up. And as you can see, it lines up perfectly. And once I do a test run, I'll know for sure that's perfect. And the knobs for the adjustable side, I just got to loosen the 4 knobs, and then I can slide it back and forth. Okay, so when I go to move it now, I got blocks under here that keeps it from moving side to side. So there's no play in that. So I can just slide it quite readily, and makes it nice and smooth. So we're going to go over how in our rotary mill we put this together. And basically this is a 3 pieces of rope hollow in the center, and this was all done on the Rotary Axis. And we're going to go through the Vectric Expire to show how we got everything so that we could actually run it on the rotary mill. So if you're ready to go, we'll switch over to that screen, and here we go. So the first thing we had to do is create a file, and our file, the finished, was going to be 15 inches by 2.8 inches, and we're doing a rotary job. The center of the axis, the 0 position, is in the center. The datum is in the center as well, and we're going along the y-axis. And then we click OK. So the first thing that we have to do, we have to round off the existing board. And it started out, and I'll show you how we get there. And I'm going to go back over here. I'm going to go to the, what do I want here? Toolpath. I want to go to the tool database. I'm going to go to my 1/2 inch end mill. Actually, I'm going to use a 3/8 inch end mill. And I'm showing the past depth on that one is 0.1875. And I think that would probably be fine. So I'll say OK. Now we're going to go to the gadget. Wrapping, create rounding toolpath. That's our blank size. We're going to raster along the edge. Say OK. Select it. And we said we're using the 3/8 end mill. Select. Okay. There we go. Now that looks a little better. Because if you take off too much, it just makes it more difficult to control. So now we can go over here to the rounding toolpath, close this, and we're going to preview it. And there's our piece of round. So now we've ran that and we got the rounded. So the next thing we're going to want to do, we're going to want to go ahead and put the not the fluting, but the spiral into the gadget. And we want to do these little fancy edges on the top and on the bottom. And when we go into that spiral, I'll show you where we do that. And we can do 3, 4, however amount of spirals you want. But if you're going to be cutting it out to the center like I did on these, where it's actually hollow in the middle, the bigger they are, the better it is. Otherwise, you'll get a lot of chatter and it has a chance of breaking. So let's go back over here, and now we're going to go to gadgets again, and we're going to go down to wrapping, and we're going to go to spiral layout. Okay, so the bit that I'm using for the spiral layout is a Barley twist. Its diameter is 1.5 inches, so that's what I'm going to use here. We're going to have 3 strands. Being that we're just making one, I'm making it a right hand, but if you were like doing candlesticks or legs, you could have one right-handed and one left-handed, and it'll make it look way better when you match them up. And then for those 2 little fancy areas on either edge, we just check the boxes here. You can check it on one end or on the other end. And like I say, the spacing between is 1.5 inches. And we're good to go. So we hit OK. Tells me that I'm going to be making 2.48 revolutions for the spiral. And let's see here, we go over to, that's our rounding toolpath. Close that. Okay, yeah, now we got to do a profile toolpath. Oh, and here's what we got right here. I'm going to back out so you can see it. See how these lines go all the way up here? That's because they're wrapping around, and that's why you see them going off the picture. For those 2 ends that we're doing, that's this line and this line. So we're going to do those first. So I'm going to select it, and they happen to have those 2 paired up. And we're going to come up here. We're going to go 3.75 deep, because that's what it shows as my cutting length on the information on the bit. The bit I'm using is a plunge router roundover, and it's actually 1.5 diameter. It just happens to be entered wrong, but it is 1.5. And we're going 3/8 inch deep. We're going to do 2 passes. I'm going to change that to 3 passes, because the less you take, the less chatter you're going to get. We want to be on the line. Don't need to do a separate pass, and we're all good. And we're going to calculate that, and then we'll preview the selected toolpath. And now we got our 2 edges. Okay, so we're making progress. So now we got to do the spirals. So once again, we're going to go back over to the 2D view. We're going to select those lines. We're going to come over here. We're going to select the same toolpath, the tool, as a profile toolpath that we're using. We're going 3.75 like we did on the ends. And same thing, we're using the same plunge roundover bit. We're going to show that as 3 passes as well. Say OK. We're on the line. None of this we don't have to worry about. We're going to calculate. So there's our profile. We'll profile the selected. And now we have a solid post. And this is where a lot of people stop. But if you want the real bang for the buck, we got to hollow out in between each of these. And if we go slightly beyond the halfway point, then basically we got daylight in the middle, and we got 3 separate spirals. And I could actually cut this here and cut this here, and I'd have 3 pieces. So we'll show you how we get to that point. So now that we got this, I'm going to rename this first one Decorative Ends. I'm going to name the second one Oop, didn't want to do that. I'm going to rename that Barley Twist. Got that. Okay, so now we're going back to our TD view, our 2D view, and our barley was made using these 3 lines. Well, if I take those same 3 lines, and being that we were cutting on the center, if you look over here at this drawing, you can see if we're on the center, we're going to cut right down in the middle of those. So I'm selecting those 3, and I am going to go over here to the Profile Toolpath again. But now I'm going to go here and I'm going to do a cut depth of, I think our final depth on our thing was 2.8. So I'm going to go like 1.46. 1.46 will be my cut depth, because you're going in, you know, over halfway. And we're going to use the 3/8 end mill. Yes, like that. And it's showing that we're going to have 8 passes. I don't think we need that many, so we'll lower it down to 6. And we'll calculate. So if we did everything right, it's going to cut out right here in the center. So let's preview that selected toolpath. And there you go. Hollow in the center. And you got 3 spirals. And if you'll notice the difference in here, on the one I just did right here, I did a 3/8 on the cut in between. On the actual one I did here, I used 1/4 inch because I was thinking that might make it look better. Well, the larger that is, the better it is, because it gives you more definition. And not to be confused, when you see those jagged lines, that's just it hasn't replenished the drawing. So that's how we get it, and you'll see the video on how it's all cut coming up next. Okay, now that we've got the Rotary Axis all set up and on the CNC machine, we need to build something with this. So we're going to put on a 3.25 by 3.25 piece of sapele, and I added a dog on the end. I had these from my old ornamental mill, and then I can put the chuck on here rather than chucking the wood, and I can put this, you know, very dead center on here, so it works out quite well. So let's go over there and we'll load this up and see what we can make. It's time to do a job now. So we're going to take this and mount it into our chuck and our end point, and then we're going to turn it round, and then we'll do the spiral, and then we'll hollow out the spiral. With this, I can put these chucks on here, and then I'm going from the inside of that. Got that centered on there, very tight. Got that in there. Tighten all this down, tighten that down. Everything's good. We're solid there. Okay, so that's good and solid. And one of the things I like to do, I have a mark on here, We're gonna get this up here. So what we gotta do now is we gotta zero this to the center line, and we gotta pick our X and Y axis. And once we have that, then we're able to start. Okay, the next step that we've got to do is we got to zero out our Z axis, and I've got it set up so that I can go to the tailstock and zero it there. That'll add on the thickness of this plus the distance down to the center, and I'll show you how we did that. Okay, so when we want to zero our tailstock, we have to change the Auto Tool Zero button so that we get down the distance that is the Avid zero plate, plus the distance from the top of that to the center of the spindle there. So I calculated that to be just a little over 1 inch, like 1.08. So what we need to do, we're going to change this button right here, this Auto Tool Zero, and we go up over here to Operator, and we got to Edit Button Script. And then we got to choose the button we're going to edit. And to my amazement, I mean, here's the one that comes from CNC router parts, and the only thing I had to change was the touch plate height. It was equal to 1, which they say right here, and I added on 1.0, I think it was like 1.07, and when I looked at it, it wasn't quite centered, and I zeroed it, and then I centered it, and I looked at that difference, and so I came up with a total distance of the 1 inch for the plate plus 1.0805 to the center of the spindle, and that gave me 2.0805, and that was the only thing I had to change. And then I would save this button. It's already been saved. Save changes. Yeah, we'll say yes. And so now when we hit Auto Tool Zero, it'll take us and zero us down to the center of the spindle where we want to do all our jobs from. So we go to our Auto Tool Zero, and we get that going. So now we have our tool zeroed right to the center of the setup here. And then the next thing I got to do is I got to line up my X and my Y. Now in my job that I created, that's going to be here in the center. So what I'm going to do, just to make sure we have that right where we need it, our board here is 15 inches, so 7.5 inches is going to be, so this would be my 7.5 mark. And now I'm going to bring this over top, and I added a laser for zeroing out my XY. And so all I have to do to get that on here, I've got to mark. I marked the center line on the tailstock, so I'm going to line up that red line with the laser right there on that line. So now I know I'm in the center, and I'm going to bring it out to the center here. So we got the XY right there, and then I go over to my Mach 3 and I have a button I set up for the XY, because obviously the laser is coming down here, but here's where the point is. So I had to offset that. When I hit that button, it's going to bring it right over top of that point. So I'll hit the zeroing, and there we are. So now we have the Z and the X and the Y. Everything has been set up and we're basically ready to go. We just need to load the program up in the Mach 3 and there we go. That's nice and smooth. Okay, we're getting ready to start cutting the barley twist. If this don't work, I'm calling it a day. Okay. Okay, the barley twist came out really nice. Now all we got to do is cut in the middle of it and hope it all don't fall apart. Okay, we're on the last leg. Right now it's looking perfect. If this last leg goes fine, we'll have this done. Yay, we made it. I think we can call that done.